Oh. Ugh. I think I heard something. Ugh. Not today, but a couple days ago. I feel like I pulled a rib. Can you pull a rib? Oh, ribs hurt right there a lot. Okay. So, a couple things. Just different news. So it looks like we're starting back up our youth Bible study. Middle school, high school, Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. My house. And we'll be going verse by verse through the Bible with the youth again, which is awesome because the last time we did this, we raised up one of the greatest generations of young people our Lower Valley's ever seen. So, if you know any young people in the Lower Valley who want to get grounded in the Word of God, send them my way. We're starting on May 18th. Now we're in Revelation chapter 13. And as a reminder, one of my things about this Bible study is I don't really study ahead. And there's so much stuff to know and learn and piece together with this. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get it all wrapped up in your head again. And so we might have to do some studying together right here and right now in order to remind me how all these things piece together. So he's still seeing these visions that started in chapter 12. Chapter 12 and chapter 13 go together. They're really one big storyline, focusing on the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And so chapter 13, verse 1, it says, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Let's just read forward and then we'll go back. And I saw on one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Maybe that was good enough. So we got to piece some things together. We have heads, we have horns, we have crowns. And if you back up and look at the dragon in verse 2 of chapter 12, it says the dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 diadems on his heads. And up here, we have 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns. And so, interesting is just looking at these and comparing them back and forth. Now, we take a look at, Daniel chapter 7, and that's where we're going to see a lot of this comparison. And this is where, once again, unlike maybe some Bible scholars, I think we can have some really good ideas about what all these things are, what the heads are, what the things represent. Where I start to see a struggle is that, I try and follow lots of different great Bible scholars, and they don't all agree. And so you have to kind of look at all of what they say and then start finding out where they seem to all agree on and why they're able to all agree, and then where they see differences of opinions and how from there you can understand why it's like, well, this is the best guess we have got. But as we were looking in Daniel, you can read about the heads, you can read about the horns, you can read about the little horn, and that's a name for the Antichrist, is the little horn. I guess I'll just go with some of the simple stuff first. So what you really see, it seems to be that the 7 heads represent 7 kingdoms, and the 7 heads are more of a successive thing. And then you see at the end times, there's going to be a head, one of those kingdoms, which is going to have 10 horns with 10 crowns. And the idea being is that that kingdom being made up of 10 parts. Now, where do you get all this? Well, you see in Daniel different visions where there's revelations of a succession. He sees beasts coming up out of the sea in Daniel, in this vision. And each beast is succeeded by another. Now, by the time of Daniel, they were at the Babylonian kingdom. And so he sees, and then there's the statue. Most of us are familiar with Daniel, but if not, there's another vision in the book of Daniel where there's a statue with a head of gold, and then the next part's silver, then bronze, then iron, then clay and iron at the feet. With the beast, you see the succession. So there's the idea where the heads are representative of these successive governments. So how do I know the heads are successive governments? Well, it would be going off the idea that it parallels the visions in Daniel. And Daniel says that these are successive governments. And what you find is the Babylonian Empire falling to the Medo-Persian Empire, falling to the Greek Empire, falling to the Roman Empire. And then there's a final one that we don't really see. And specifically in the vision of the statue, the feet of the statue is this idea of clay and iron, where the legs of iron being the Romans, that they ruled with this iron strength. The feet will have the iron. And so in some ways, it's like the revival of the Roman Empire is what many people point to. But it's clay and iron, which then shows that somehow it's stuck together, but it's going to be more fragile. And it talks about the 10 toes. And this is where you see 10 toes on the feet. Here you see, rather, because again, 7 heads, 10 horns. It doesn't say where the 10 horns are. And it's my belief that 10 horns are on one head. And just like that final successive empire has the 10 toes, here you have one head with 10 horns. And the idea being is an allegiance of 10 nations. I know I'm not getting everything here. All those empires, boom, 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 they succeeded each other. So that only gives us 5. What about the other 2? Some people believe that could be the Egyptian Empire and the Assyrian Empire. Those would be earlier, though. Those would have predated Daniel. So those had already been in the past. And specifically, though, why these empires? Why not another empire? Well, these are the empires that subdued Israel. And if you think about it in the fact that God's time clock, his calendar, and his focus has always been around Israel, the epicenter of creation. And so the Egyptians had them. They were captive to the Egyptians, and they would continue to be one of their greatest foes in the early years of the reign. And then you have the Assyrians who came in and took the north captive, and they weren't a small foe to Judah either. The Assyrians took King Manasseh captive. The Assyrians and Sennacherib surrounded the city. And if it wasn't for pressure from Babylon, the Assyrians would have continued to be a big deal. And so there are 7 nations: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, the Medo-Persians, the Greek Empire, and the Romans. And all those latter ones, they all controlled Israel. The Medo-Persians controlled Israel. The Greeks controlled Israel, Greece. The Romans controlled Israel. And so here you have all these things. Now, we have 10 crowns, 10 leaders, right, who are in there. And then what we have in the story in Daniel, and because you're going to see here talking about 7 crowns back in 7 diadem in chapter 12. of the 10 horns, the little horn, one is going to come up and it's going to conquer 3 of the horns. Now, if it wasn't counted as one of the 3, right? You have 10 horns, or 10, yeah, 10 horns, there we go. Here's 3. This guy comes and conquers these 3. With those 3 gone under his control, you're now left with 7. And so what we're seeing is that one of these leaders is going to somehow get the other groups under his control. And now, this one of the heads, as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. So he was wounded with a wound that should have killed him, but he survives. And so Zechariah chapter 11, let's see here. Zechariah chapter 11, verses 16 and 17. Well, it talks about a foolish shepherd in verse 15. Next, take for yourselves the implements of a foolish shepherd. So it's talking about a shepherd who's going to be a bad shepherd. Someone who's going to lead his people, but do a bad job of it. And it says, for indeed I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not take care for those who are cut off, nor seek the young, nor heal those that are broken, nor feed those that still stand, but he will eat the flesh and fat and tear the hooves in pieces. Woe to the worthless shepherd. And that word worthless there, it's the word used of an idol. So you could actually even say the idol shepherd, and not I-D-L-E, but I-D-O-L, an idol which you worship. He's the idol shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword shall be against his arm and against his right eye. His arm shall completely wither, and his right eye shall be totally blinded. Now, this is just an interesting coincidence, perhaps. But if you notice down in verse 16, we'll get there later, don't worry. It talks about the mark of the beast, which they'll receive on their right hand or their foreheads. So it's interesting to see that he receives a mortal wound of which he should have died, but he doesn't die. But his right arm remains damaged. It says withered, and his right eye. And this is just, again, we're in my story, in my movie that goes on in my head, not what the Bible teaches. So I'm just saying the Bible doesn't say this is the way it'll happen, but to me it plays out nicely, and it's just what I'm imagining. So let me have my fun. But the Antichrist goes to confront the 2 witnesses. It says that they are able to consume those who come against them with fire. And if they bring that fire down, and he kind of does one of these things, just seeing his arm and his face being singed by the fire, and while everyone in the goon squad dies, he miraculously survives the fire and the attack, but permanently disfigured on the right side of his face and on his arm. And it kind of makes you wonder, the mark of the beast, the arm that was disfigured, that's the arm you have to have the mark on. And it says put on the forehead. And I'll be honest, I've never done an in-deep Greek study on the word for forehead there. But it's kind of like, do you wear something, almost symbolic of the wounds that the beast had gotten? Don't know for sure. But there's the idea of him being mortally wounded. I think we can move a little bit further. So verse 4, it says, they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue 42 months. So again, 3.5 years. Then it says, then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. Let's see here. I'm just thinking, I don't want to hop how I want to go, but Daniel chapter 11, it's like we should just keep a finger in Daniel. Let's see all my verses here. Verses 29 to 30 something. Daniel, okay. And at the appointed time, he shall return and go toward the south, and he shall be like a farmer. Yep. Okay. For ships from Cyprus come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. And forces shall be mustered by him. And they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. They shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery. But the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. The king shall do all according to his will. He shall exalt and magnify himself, so this leader, above God. So this guy, he's going to magnify himself above God, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished, and what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither God, the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a God of fortresses, and a God which his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold, silver, with precious stones, and pleasant things. He shall act against the strong fortress with a foreign God, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. Chapter 12. I just wrote down 1, 6, and 7, so let's just see what it is. And at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who watches over the sons of your people. There shall be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered. It's during this time that the Jews are delivered, everyone who's found written in the book. Verse 6. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Verse 7, then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, and he held his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forevermore, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Now, reading Daniel chapter 11 and 12 by itself, it's a little mysterious. It's prophetic. It has this apocalyptic, prophetic flair to it. When you pair it with Revelation, now the pieces start coming together. And again, reading through that kind of quickly might be a little tough, but have those references in your Bible. Pair up the beginning of Revelation 13 with the end of Daniel 11 and the beginning of Daniel chapter 12. And you start seeing the pieces coming together. And this is why end time studies, it's not like there's just one book that has all the answers. Revelation has a lot for us, but without those other books, without the other 65 books of the Bible, it's hard to put together a full picture, which is why I think you see so many different views on the end times. People read Revelation without having a good grounding in Daniel, and they start trying to put together a picture without all the other pieces. And yet when you see that consistency, when you see that 3.5 years being spoken of, and when you see 7 years being spoken of, right? And I'll just, because people, you see 3.5 again and again and again, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. But notice that in Daniel chapter 9, it says, verse 27, then he, the Antichrist, the one who's going to be come to destroy, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, 7-year period. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wings of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, each until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. And so that's the abomination of desolation. Um, and so we see these timelines now. We're seeing, okay, like throughout the Bible, there's a consistency about a 7 year treaty, but at the 3.5 year mark, whole lots of stuff changes. Kind of the cat's out of the bag at that point. And as we continue in Revelation, what we're going to see is that angels are going to be in the sky proclaiming the gospel. And when the mark of the beast finally shows up, maybe we'll get down to the mark of the beast tomorrow. Um, you're going to find that there's no mystery. So maybe that's just the last thing, and I'll really hit this home tomorrow if we get down there. There's no mystery surrounding the mark of the beast. There's really no mystery at all. What it will look like exactly, there's maybe a little mystery there. What there's no mystery about is that when it comes time to take the mark of the beast, the Antichrist will be openly blaspheming God and saying, pick a side, God or me. There's no way to do this on accident. There's no way to do this and have it surprise you and shock you. It's going to be something very plain. And even when they talk about grooming people and, oh, we're just getting society, to where they're just going to do whatever the government tells them until they take the mark of the beast. Once again, no matter how much grooming gets done, everyone who takes the mark will know exactly what they're signing on to. So you mean I take that to say that I want to say, F you, God, I'm siding with him? And that's really what it is. Like, I don't like using that kind of words, but it's like, that's the idea. It's like, it'll be so in your face rebellion against God to take the mark of the beast that everyone knows what they're going to be doing. It does say that people might be coerced or kind of pressured to take it, but there's going to be no confusion about what they're doing. That's the emphasis. And so, cat's out of the bag at this point. People are going to see what's going on. We'll continue this tomorrow and continue to unfold some of these kind of exciting and interesting parts of end time study. So, I'll see you guys then. You guys take care. 7:30 tomorrow. Hop on and we'll see what happens. Adios.